Spoofing is a conversation with Elon Musk, his fourth time on the Lex Fridman podcast. I thought you were going to finish it. It's one of the greatest themes in all of film history.
Yeah, that's great.
So I was just thinking about the Roman Empire, as one does.
There's that whole meme where old guys are thinking about the Roman Empire at least once a day.
And half the population is confused whether it's true or not. But more seriously, thinking about the wars going on in the world today. And as you know, war and military conquest has been a big part of Roman society and culture. And I think has been a big part of most empires and dynasties throughout human history. So
yeah, they usually came as a result of conquest. I mean, there's some like the Austro-Hungarian Empire where there was just a lot of sort of clever marriages.
But fundamentally, there's an engine of conquest. And they celebrate excellence in warfare. Many of the leaders were excellent generals. Yeah, that kind of thing. So big picture question. Grok approved. I asked if this is a good question to ask.
Kid tested, Grok approved?
Yeah. At least on fun mode. To what degree do you think war is part of human nature versus a consequence of how human societies are structured? I ask this as you have somehow controversially been a proponent of peace.
I'm generally a proponent of peace. I mean, ignorance is perhaps, in my view, the real enemy to be countered. That's the real hard part, not, fighting other humans. But all creatures fight. I mean, the jungle is you look at people think of this nature as perhaps some sort of peaceful thing, but in fact, it is not. There's some quite funny Werner Herzog thing where he's like in the jungle, like saying that it's like basically just murder and death in every direction. I mean, the plants and animals in the jungle are constantly trying to kill and eat each other every single day, every minute. So it's not like, we're unusual in that respect.
Well, there's a relevant question here, whether with greater intelligence comes greater control over these base instincts for violence.
Yes. We have much more of an ability to control our limbic instinct for violence than, say, a chimpanzee. And in fact, if one looks at, say, chimpanzee society, it is not friendly. I mean, the bonobos are an exception. But chimpanzee society is filled with violence, and it's quite horrific, frankly. That's our limbic system in action. Like, you don't want to be on the wrong side of a chimpanzee. It'll eat your face off and tear your nuts off.
Yeah, basically, there's no limits or ethics or... the Romans had just war. There's no just war in chimpanzee societies. Is war and dominance by any means necessary?
Yeah, chimpanzee society is like a primitive version of human society. They're not like peace loving, basically, at all. There's extreme violence, and then once in a while, somebody who's watched too many Disney movies decides to raise a chimpanzee as a pet, and then that eats their face or rips their nuts off or chews their fingers off, that kind of thing. Yeah, it's happened several times.
Ripping your nuts off is an interesting strategy for interaction.
It's happened to people. It's unfortunate. Like that's, I guess, one way to ensure that the other chimp doesn't, contribute to the gene pool.
Well, from a martial arts perspective, it's a fascinating strategy.
the nut ripper.
I wonder which of the martial arts teaches that.
I think it's safe to say if somebody's got your nuts in their hands and has the option of ripping them off, you will be amenable to whatever they want.
Yeah, safe to say. So, like I said, somehow controversially, you've been a proponent of peace on Twitter, on X.
Yeah.
So let me ask you about the wars going on today and to see what the path to peace could be. How do you hope the current war in Israel and Gaza comes to an end? What path do you see that can minimize human suffering in the long term in that part of the world?
Well, I think that that part of the world is definitely like if you look up there is no easy answer in the dictionary, it'll be that like the picture of the Middle East, in Israel especially. So there is no easy answer. Or what my this is strictly my opinion of is that the goal of Hamas was to provoke an overreaction from Israel. They obviously do not expect to have a military victory, but they really wanted to commit the worst atrocities that they could in order to provoke the most aggressive response possible from Israel, and then leverage that aggressive response to rally Muslims worldwide for the cause of Gaza and Palestine, which they have succeeded in doing. So the counterintuitive thing here, I think that the thing that I think should be done, even though it is very difficult, is that I would recommend that Israel engage in the most conspicuous acts of kindness possible. Everything. That is the actual thing that would thwart the goal of Hamas.
So in some sense, the degree that makes sense in geopolitics, turn the other cheek, implemented.
It's not exactly turn the other cheek, because I do think that there's, I think it is appropriate for Israel to find the Hamas members and, either kill them or incarcerate them. Like that's something has to be done because they're just going to keep coming otherwise. But in addition to that, they need to do whatever they can. There's some talk of establishing, for example, a mobile hospital. I'd recommend doing that. Just making sure that there's food, water, medical necessities, and just be over the top about it and be very transparent, so that people can't claim it's a trick. Like just put a webcam on the thing, all 24/7.
Deploy acts of kindness.
Yeah, conspicuous acts of kindness that are unequivocal, meaning they can't be somehow, because Hamas will then their response will be, "Oh, it's a trick." Mm-hmm. Therefore, you have to counter how is it not a trick.
This ultimately fights the broader force of hatred in the region.
Yes. And I'm not sure who said it. It's an apocryphal saying, but an eye for an eye makes everyone blind. Now that neck of the woods, they really believe in the whole eye for an eye thing. But I mean, you really have, if you're not going to just outright commit genocide, like against an entire people, which obviously would not be acceptable to really shouldn't be acceptable to anyone, then you're going to leave basically a lot of people alive who subsequently, hate Israel. So really the question is like, how, for every Hamas member that you kill, how many did you create? Mm-hmm. And if you create more than you killed, you've not succeeded. That's the real situation there. And it's safe to say that if you kill somebody's child in Gaza, you've made at least a few Hamas members who will die just to kill an Israeli. That's the situation. So, but I mean, this is one of the most contentious subjects one could possibly discuss. But I think if the goal ultimately is some sort of long-term peace, one has to look at this from the standpoint of, over time, are there more or fewer terrorists being created?
Let me just linger on war.
Yeah, well, war. It's safe to say wars always existed and always will exist.
Always will exist.
Always has existed and always will exist.
I hope not. You think it always will?
There will always be war. It's a question of just how much war, and what there's this sort of the scope and scale of war. Mm-hmm. But to imagine that there would not be any war in the future, I think would be a very unlikely outcome.
Yeah, you talked about the culture series. There's war even there.
Yes. This giant war. The first book starts off with a gigantic galactic war where trillions die. Trillions.
But it still nevertheless protects these pockets of flourishing. Somehow you can have galactic war and still have pockets of flourishing.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I guess if we are able to one day expand to, fill the galaxy or whatever, there will be a galactic war at some point.
The scale. I mean, the scale of war has been increasing. It's like a race between the scale of suffering and the scale of flourishing.
Yes.
A lot of people seem to be using this tragedy to beat the drums of war and feed the military-industrial complex. Do you worry about this? The people who are rooting for escalation, and how can it be stopped?
One of the things that does concern me is that there are very few people alive today who actually viscerally understand the horrors of war, at least in the U.S. I mean, obviously there are people on the front lines in Ukraine and Russia who understand just how terrible war is. But how many people in the West understand it? My grandfather was in World War II. He was severely traumatized. He was there, I think, for almost 6 years in East and North Africa and Italy. All his friends were killed in front of him, and he would have died too, except they randomly gave some, I guess, IQ test or something, and he scored very high. Now, he was not an officer. He was, I think, a corporal or a sergeant or something like that, because he didn't finish high school. Because he had to drop out of high school because his dad died, and he had to work to support his siblings. So because he didn't graduate high school, he was not eligible for the officer corps. So, he kind of got put into the cannon fodder category, basically. But then just randomly they gave him this test. He was transferred to British intelligence in London. That's where he met my grandmother. But he had PTSD next level. I mean, just didn't talk. And if you tried talking to him, he'd just tell you to shut up. And he won a bunch of medals. Never bragged about it once. Not even hinted. Nothing. I found out about it because his military records are online. That's how I know. So he would say no way in hell do you want to do that again. But how many people? Now he obviously he died 20 years ago or longer, actually 30 years ago. How many people are alive that remember World War II? Not many.
And the same perhaps applies to the threat of nuclear war.
Yeah, I mean, there are enough nuclear bombs pointed at the United States to make the radioactive rubble bounce many times.
There's two major wars going on right now. So you talked about the threat of AGI quite a bit, but now, as we sit here with the intensity of conflict going on, do you worry about nuclear war?
I think we shouldn't discount the possibility of nuclear war. It is a civilizational threat. Right now, I could be wrong, but I think the current probability of nuclear war is quite low. But there are a lot of nukes pointed at us. So, and we have a lot of nukes pointed at other people. They're still there. Nobody's put their guns away. The missiles are still in the silos.
And the leaders don't seem to be the ones with the nukes talking to each other.
No. There are wars which are tragic and difficult on a local basis, and then there are wars which are civilization ending or have that potential. Obviously, global thermonuclear warfare has high potential to end civilization, perhaps permanently, but certainly, to severely wound and perhaps set back human progress by to the Stone Age or something. I don't know. Pretty bad. Probably scientists and engineers want to be super popular after that as well. They're like, you got us into this mess.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So generally, I think we obviously want to prioritize civilizational risks over things that are painful and tragic on a local level, but not civilizational.
How do you hope the war in Ukraine comes to an end? And what's the path, once again, to minimizing human suffering there?
Well, I think that what is likely to happen, which is really pretty much the way it is that something very close to the current lines will be how a ceasefire or truce happens. But you just have a situation right now where whoever goes on the offensive will suffer casualties at several times the rate of whoever's on the defense. Because you've got defense in depth, you've got minefields, trenches, anti-tank defenses. Nobody has air superiority because the anti-aircraft missiles are really far better than the aircraft. Like, there are far more of them. And so neither side has air superiority. Tanks are basically death traps, just slow moving, and they're not immune to anti-tank weapons. So you really just have long range artillery and infantry trenches. It's World War I all over again with drones. Throwing little drones, some drones there,
which makes the long range artillery just that much more accurate and better, and so more efficient at murdering people on both sides.
Yeah. So it's whoever is. You don't want to be trying to advance from either side, because the probability of dying is incredibly high. So in order to overcome defense in depth trenches and minefields, you really need significant local superiority in numbers. Ideally combined arms, where you do a fast attack with aircraft, a concentrated number of tanks, and a lot of people. That's the only way you're going to punch through a line. And then you're going to punch through and